Hello, and welcome to MarketingMel Tells. This is our first podcast, and we're so excited to be here. I am Mary Ellen Miller, otherwise known as MarketingMel.
And I am Kaitlin. So, Mel, why don't you tell us what's going on in the marketing world and public relations world today?
Well, thanks for asking, Kaitlin. You know, I get this great aggregate information about the latest news in PR and marketing. And one of the stories that just came through was about the rise of influencers in journalism today. And, you know, I have seen that. Certainly all of us could probably think of some examples at the national level where we watched influencers play huge roles in the news. But what about at the local level? Well, yes, I have actually watched that very much evolve over the last couple years right here in our region, where someone and this person that I'm thinking of, it was actually a very seasoned PR pro, moved to the region and began a social media page that has become extremely influential in our region. And I know people that turn to that to get the news. So whereas once you might turn to your television or your radio, it's interesting that certain people, even at the local level, can have feeds that are seen as very influential in the community. And luckily, this person's a great person and, in fact, would make a great guest on our podcast.
Yes.
But you can see how that could go both ways. A person could also perhaps have nefarious means. So we do need to, that's a whole other topic for another day, which would be misinformation out there on social media. But in this case, this is someone providing great information and someone that I then quickly realized I needed to treat as a member of the traditional media. So that person is on my media list. They get all the same press releases and so forth when I'm issuing those for my clients. And it's just kind of neat to me to watch the evolution of communications because it certainly is changing day by day, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and a lot of people don't think of influencers as, despite the name, having influence in the media, because everyone's like, oh, it's just some teenage girl in her bedroom that makes money or whatever. And it's like, no, not in today. So I think it's really important that you do treat them just like any media source. And I think that'll get you, it has gotten you a lot of respect in that regard as well. So, you know, you kind of are building that rapport and also your reputation, which is pretty good. So that's really exciting, though.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I think it's just important to always look at this with a critical eye because I realized this person right away was, as I said, on the up and up and wanting to provide positive and important information to people. But we all need to have a critical eye in case it's someone who perhaps is providing misinformation as well. And that's something that we're going to have to be looking at more and more. Anyways, it's what we're dealing with in the world of communications today, constantly changing.
What do you think you would do, though, like if it was an influencer who was spreading misinformation, like using that critical eye?
Probably go to them directly. That's always the most important thing in communications, right? You want to just go and talk to the person one-on-one. Again, thankfully, in this case, this is somebody who's a purveyor of regular just news that people need to know.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I guess I have, a main question for you, Mel. Why a podcast? Like, what's the situation? Like, what do you want to accomplish, I guess? I mean, podcasts are pretty cool.
Truth is, podcasts are a great way to get out information. I know I listen to one every morning when I'm on a treadmill. I try to listen to a variety of podcasts. I am an author, and so that's what got me really interested. I started listening to some top authors and how they communicate, and they use podcasts very effectively. So I just thought it would be a great way to share communications information. And also, I think it's fun that myself as a senior level communicator is chatting with you as someone who's getting ready to start in the communications field. And I think that's a fantastic combo because for our listeners, they'll be all over that spectrum, right? They're bound to be on one end, the other, or somewhere in between. So we're glad to share info with them on our different viewpoints that where we might see things differently or where we come together on communications viewpoints. So What about
And
you, Kaitlin? What
podcast.
do you think would be the... Uh-huh.
No, I was just saying, podcasts are getting increasingly popular. Like I know, gosh, back in 2010, 2011, Apple had introduced their first version of podcasts, and no one knew what they were, and no one was talking about them. But now, like with SoundCloud and Spotify and even iTunes and all these other places are now giving podcasters platforms, and people will talk about pretty much anything. Um, one of my favorite TV shows is Gilmore Girls, and there's a whole
Mm-hmm.
podcast that I listen to with like weekly episodes that just talks about that one show. And like a 7-season show, you wouldn't think there
It's
was that
great.
much to talk about, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's hours of content. And I just eat it right up. So I think like you said, it's just a great way to have great communication. I think people like learning. I think people like getting their news while they're cooking or cleaning or driving. It's kind of an easier way to absorb a lot more information without having to make time and sit and watch the 6 o'clock news every single, day or whatever. So I guess it's a way to definitely, like you said, kind of build that community, build connections. It's also just, it's kind of great practice because I'm not really a natural, I guess it's hard to explain, but I'm not usually like super great with like having, um, talking a lot. I'm more of like, I like listening a lot. And so I think this will also be a really good experience to kind of teach me how to be a little more out of my shell as well. And with your guidance, I think that'll be a really good experience. So I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a good idea.
Well, great. And let me say, as a communicator, if you're a good listener, that's one of the top skills. So good for you, Kaitlin.
Yeah, perfect.
You've already shown excellent communication skills. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what the mission of this podcast is. And I see it as building community one connection at a time. So when one person listens and then the next, we're building a community there with MarketingMel Tells. And there are going to be people that are interested in communications, trends, what's going on out there, as well as seeing it from both the junior level and senior level communicator viewpoint.
Absolutely.
Does that sound good? Are you in agreement with that?
Oh, I'm in great agreement. That's a little a snazzy little, mission statement there. I really like it. So I guess our next step is to actually tell our listeners who we are, because they're like, cool, Mel and Kaitlin, I have no idea who you people are, how you know each other, what you guys do. So I guess if you wanna start and just tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm glad to, Kaitlin. So I have been in communications a long time. I started out in the world of radio and television news, and from there got into corporate PR, agency PR, briefly in development, back into journalism briefly as editor of a beautiful regional publication. It was a magazine, and then back into the world of marketing for several years, and then had an opportunity to go out on my own and started MarketingMel. This was several years ago now. It was in, I believe, the very beginning of 2009. And then I had a chance to be the communications and PR outreach manager for the Boone Dam project, which was a major infrastructure project in our region. It was a $400 million infrastructure project. And I absolutely loved that job. For 7 years, I had the opportunity to sit around a conference room table every morning with some of the brightest minds in engineering and geology, talk about communications of areas that you know nothing about, but you're about to learn about very quickly. That's the great thing I love about the communications field. If you have the foundation of communications, you can usually learn whatever it is that you're working in. So I had that great opportunity to learn about, oh my goodness, geology, geoengineering, geotechnology, enough to
Basically
communicate it
add
with the
geo
public,
and then
because
add every other word after that.
it's the truth, because it was literally a dam project. Everybody liked to kid me that that was my damn job, right? But it really was a major dam in our area that needed repairing. And so I communicated with the public. We used a number of channels, including Twitter was very effective at that time. We used newsletters, community updates, media updates. I remember one of the most fun ones was taking the media on a boat ride so they could actually see from totally different perspective how the dam was being repaired and the kind of work we were doing. And I actually ended up writing a book after that called Fill the Damn Thing Up. And it's about building connections, which is just exactly what this podcast is about. And how do you go about building connections when you're on a major infrastructure project? And I believe there were two things about that made it, people say, well, why did you write a book? Well, one, it was an international project. We had minds from all over the world working on that, people from France and Italy and UK, you name it. And so that made it interesting. But also the fact that, let's face it, right now, as we're talking, we've got severe infrastructure issues going on in California. Those poor people out there, right? They've had a lot of challenges with these terrible fires going on. But it just shows the example of infrastructure being so necessary in our country, and then the communications outward of whatever that infrastructure project may be. And certainly we'll see that come more to light as that unwinds. But I guess in a nutshell, then when that project was over, just to sort of wrap up this story and put a bow on it, I had the chance to go back on my own. And that was in September of 22 when the project was complete, and went back on my own, have had some really great clients since then. And I'm just really excited to be able to provide communications consultation to people that really need me to share whatever the great story is that they're doing. If I can help them share that story, I'm glad to do it. So that's me, but let's talk about you, Kaitlin.
Well, let's see. I obviously don't have quite the history that you do. So I am finishing up as a senior at East Tennessee State, management and marketing major, which is pretty cool. It's really cool because I know we're going to talk about kind of how we met and how we know each other, but just to really build on that, building connections, no pun intended. Like the how I ended up minoring in marketing and basically switching kind of my concentration to essentially marketing, where like all my classes are marketing, my internships, all that stuff. So I took one principles of marketing class sophomore year, and this incredible professor, Michelle Sullivan, she was amazing. And this was a class, this was like an intro level, gen ed class. So man, there was probably 9,500 people in my class or whatever, and probably not that many, but it felt like a lot. And so I figured like there was like no way that this was just a class, like I wasn't gonna be like having some crazy experience or anything. But the way our professor did it was just, she made so many just projects and really interesting in-class assignments that actually made me like interested for marketing. And we had like a bunch of guest speakers come and talk, which was just really cool because I hadn't really had a class that was like that before. It's just, hey, buy this $300 textbook, read it, take a test, bye. So I really liked kind of the way she did things, but she actually made, I thought marketing was just sales, which that's an aspect of it, but I got to really kind of see more of the distribution or supply chain aspect, the communications aspect, the public relations aspect. So it ended up, from that one class, I was like, well, I haven't declared a minor yet. I'm going to dive straight into marketing. And I've taken all my marketing classes pretty much with her, and I have loved it. And then ended up joining AMA, which is ETSU's chapter for American Marketing Association, which is a actually global organization for marketing, but AMA is kind of more of the American branch specifically, and they have over 200 chapters across America. And I ended up joining. Not very long after that, we had some really awesome fundraisers. I got invited to go to the ICC conference in New Orleans, which that could be a whole episode in of itself about ICC. But and then eventually I got elected as Vice President of Communications. And then, so that has been a really exciting thing, and Vice President of Communications, which has been really fun and has really got to, allow me to really learn internal communication, external communication, and market for AMA. So, and then of course I've had a couple of internships. had a part-time job where I was working for a startup company doing web design and just some social media marketing as well. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And then through Michelle Sullivan and AMA is how I got connected with you. So it's been really fun. I mean, how was that for you? Like when you know, met me, I guess, or knew that you needed an intern or something.
Well, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. But I'm really glad to give the shout out to your professor there, Michelle Sullivan, because that works both ways. One, for people like me that need an intern, be sure to connect with the professors because the professors are going to tell you who their star students are. So,
Oh, yes.
Michelle was the one that made the connection there, and I was delighted. And you were very professional. You sent me your resume. We had a job interview and so forth, and that was great. But we hit it off from the start. What's it been? About a year now, at least? I've lost track.
Not, yeah, 10 months because March, it was March 25th, I believe, was our first day because I joined AMA in February. So there was not that long of a gap.
So, speaking of building connections, the theme of this podcast, that's what it's all about. I had gone to lunch with Michelle with another PR professional, and we just sat down and chatted about our needs. So that's really how it starts. Something as basic as taking a professor or going to lunch with a professor and really sharing your needs. And then they get to hear from their standpoint, what are the needs out there in terms of students that the business world has? So was glad to do that. The second thing you mentioned that I'm really appreciative of is your get up and go in terms of getting involved in the AMA student chapter. To anyone listening to this, if you're a student, get involved, whether it's your public relations student society at your school, or in your case, it's your American Marketing Association group at your college. But those groups lead to amazing things. And look at you. You've already been to New Orleans at an international conference. That's fantastic. That probably puts you light years ahead of a lot of other Gen Z job candidates right now. Really. And then it put you in a leadership position. You just mentioned your VP of communications. And you're out there, I see you, on social media and so forth with your AMA, your Instagram, and all these ways that you're out there communicating. And furthermore, we can go ahead and say that you even invited, you and I were a duo together in front of your AMA student group talking about AI and how we use AI, which frankly, that'll be another podcast for another day.
We already have that plan.
But I just really want to give you the shout out there as well, because you have shown that, you're wanting to achieve yourself. You're wanting to better yourself and grow yourself. And that's so important for any college student listening.
I really appreciate that. I mean, especially I feel like when you first kind of get into college, you have kind of a list of priorities. And I think that's like a really hard struggle is that a lot of most students work, right? They have to work to support themselves. They want a social life. I mean, some of them enjoy joining like sororities or fraternities or, whatever. A lot of people are involved in like religion, like a church group or, whatever. A lot of people are, trying to figure out having fun, but also maintaining a scholarship and good grades. And like, I think a lot of people overlook clubs and organizations. They're like, I don't have time for this. Like everything else I have. But I find that organizations are just, it's kind of kills four birds with one stone in a sense. Like you have your professional development, you connect with your professors, and connections with professors make a big deal in your grade. I mean, just to be point blank, I mean, no one's going to give you a free A, but if you're trying really hard and you're really close with a professor, they're much more likely to give you an extra credit or help you with something that's going to be very beneficial in their class. You're getting that socialization, you're getting those communication skills. It's just, honestly, it's so underrated. And everyone's like, oh, join a club. And like, yeah, that's fine. But joining a professional organization club, like the Young Entrepreneurs of America, Women in Business is another one ETSU has, the Finance Club, Entrepreneurs Club, all these different organizations, all of them, frankly, are ways to get everything you want from an organization and still have that really good social aspect. So yeah, that's definitely a high recommendation for me is like, find an organization, stick in it, attend. Dues aren't that expensive. Like if you cut out coffee for a month, you should be able to afford it. That's what I did anyways. Let's be honest, I actually didn't. But But yeah, it's just it's a really good opportunity. And so I think that's just like the best advice that you can give any marketing, business, communications, digital marketing student who's like just starting out in college is get involved as soon as possible.
And you just mentioned Entrepreneurs Club. I didn't really touch on my education, but I got my MBA from ETSU and was part of that Entrepreneurs Club. And man, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
Every month they would bring in these awesome speakers. And that's another thing. Who do you connect with as a result of that club? And then just shout out to education in general. So I also got my undergraduate from Cornell University in communications. And since getting my MBA, I went on and got my accreditation in public relations, which is almost like a master's in PR. It was a very intense accreditation process, and it's called APR. But since you're busily working through college, I did want to show you that education, I believe, is really a lifelong experience. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do plan on getting my master's eventually. Once I kind of start getting settled into a job somewhere, I do plan on probably going back to school and doing a master's at some point, just because the master's, I frankly love school. I don't really love the school while also needing to make a living situation, but so I definitely really want to go back and do that. And so I got some really good advice from actually the conference I went to, where she has like 3 master's degrees or something. And she was like, wait 5 years after your bachelor's before you get your master's, because you need that experience and you need that stability and job security before you do that. So I was like, okay, fair enough.
Well, particularly if you want an MBA, I think it's very important to have business experience if you're going to go on for a master's in business. And the other thing I would say is, and I think you said that speaker also told you, if you get a chance, get the employer to pay for your master's.
Yes. Yes.
That's ideal. That's really ideal.
Well,
let's talk a little bit more about internships and mentorships. And I know that my personal experience in terms of why having an intern is so important to me is that I was mentored way back in those TV news days that I mentioned to you. It was actually between junior and senior year in college in Buffalo, New York, where I grew up. And I had the opportunity to work at the local TV station, Channel 7, WKBW-TV. And this veteran cameraman just took me under his wing. And when we would go out with the news crews, and so we would always be with a reporter, and I'd be driving around in the back of the news car with the team. And so I'd get to hear what the reporter was thinking, how they were coming up with a story for the day and working as a team with the videographer. The cameraman would then let me, after the reporter completed their what's called a stand-up, where you're on camera and you're talking there at the end, would let me practice. And so that caused me then to be able to get a reel, so to speak, your own. Back then it was a tape, now to be a digital reel, but you always need some sort of recording of yourself if you're going to be in that line of work, right? So it just meant so much to have someone willing to take an interest in me. And since that time, I just have always felt that it was my challenge, so to speak, to give back. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I've so enjoyed having you as my current intern at MarketingMel, because I'm just very appreciative of the opportunity to watch these wonderful college students like yourself basically blossom and fly on your own.
I guess a question I have, especially that our listeners might be wondering, is what is the difference between a mentorship and an internship? Because lots of interns have not great experiences, or frankly great experiences, but there is a lack of connection. And I feel like going into this internship, I had 2 other internships, that I wasn't expecting for us to be, I was obviously expecting us to get along and be close and everything, but I wasn't expecting us to really have gone into that mentor-mentee kind of role. So I guess, what would you say is the difference? Like, what is the defining trait between, being an intern and a mentee? You know what I mean?
Well, I'll give my opinion, but then I'd love to hear yours, because you're the one in those shoes. But my thought would be that you and I, in our presentation that we did to your AMA club, talked about, we showed a picture even of somebody just making coffee, and then we put a big red Ghostbusters X through that. Nope, that's not it. because you don't just want to be somebody that makes coffee for somebody. You want to be relevant to the business. You want to be in there, boots on the ground, learning about the business. And so to me, that's the difference with a mentorship. I mean, we're going to the chamber annual meeting next week. I'll be introducing you to a lot of folks. That's a mentorship. An internship, I don't know, I guess, while I call it an internship, I feel like it's so much more what you've been able to do. Look at this. This is so much fun. Our first MarketingMel Tells together.
I know.
So the creativity goes with the mentorship. But how about you? What do you think is the definition?
I think, I've definitely had internships where it's been kind of a lack of respect. And I don't necessarily mean it as they didn't respect me. I mean it as like respecting time, respecting like I worked in an internship and it was like it would be 11 o'clock at night and they would text me, hey, can you like fill this out and submit it? And I'm like, it's 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
and I have like,
zero boundaries there.
And I worked full time at the point. And if you ever said, okay, can I get to it tomorrow or blah blah blah, no.
Oh,
just like that was it. Like just no, like not even no anything. So also just a matter of wanting you to have all this responsibility, but also giving you I'm trying to think of the right word to say. It's more of expecting you to be responsible and handle all these things, but also giving you no credit or freedom to make those decisions. So it would kind of be like, I would have someone be like, okay, I need this done by a certain time. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, how do you, and I'd like get it done. And they'd be like, no, it's not good enough. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, what can I do different? And it would just be little to no feedback. And it would be very just kind of frustrating because you would kind of constantly be doing all these tasks. And it felt like there was no kind of wiggle room or any kind of right way to do it for that situation. And then of course, don't even get me started on unpaid internships. That could also be a whole nother level. If you don't respect an employee enough to pay them, then why are they working for you? But I think it's also like just that open communication. I've noticed with our internship, there's been free communication both ways. There have been, I think, obviously, you've helped me out, I think, a lot more than I've helped you out. But I think that you've also gained things from me being here, which is probably, I mean, that's a big point for that. But I don't know. I just think it's also just, it's that communication. It's that level of respect. And that's also kind of, I guess, just more of a friendship. Like, I mean, how many times have like, we gone out for each other's birthdays or like, done something fun, or, I mean, my car wouldn't start and you and your husband came and picked me up.
Right. That's not usually part of the job description, but it happened to work that time.
Mean, your husband installed my car battery for me in the snow. So, I mean, I really wouldn't consider that a job description, but it's those kind of things that kind of make it a little more special, if that makes sense. It's just like that connection, I guess.
Well, thanks. And I certainly hope that connection continues our whole lives, because one thing that I can say that I can really look back at and look forward to is that I love seeing where past interns of MarketingMel go. And I could say universally they have gone on to really, really good things, really great heights. So I know you'll be another one of them.
Yes. And for our listeners, I apologize. There was a giant rolling cart of something that just come barreling down the hall. It was very loud.
I didn't hear it, but you never know.
It was
I
just
did
like
not hear it.
Rolling down. It was like, oh, okay. When you were talking. So that's good.
That's always the way when you're recording, Kaitlin. That is totally the way. I recorded my book as an audio book as well. And same thing. We would hear all these crazy things in the air conditioner that we never heard before.
Oh yeah, I was
just
a radio
the story
DJ.
Of audio.
Yeah, I was a radio DJ for a little bit for the ETSC radio station, and it would be like the whole time music was playing, it would be silent, it'd be quiet, everything would be fine. The second I'd hit that button to start speaking, there'd be some catastrophe of rain pouring down on the metal roof or something. And I'd just be like, all right, well, this is the way it is.
Right. Well, Kaitlin, what about some other things? Did you want to share anything about where maybe you've seen your internship take you on to additional connecting or networking or things like that?
No, absolutely. So I guess the most recent example, well, just to give a little more backstory, because this is important on how we met. So basically, I joined AMA, didn't even mention needing an internship. I had an internship at the time, didn't even, say anything
Was
about
it
it.
the
And then
11 o'clock text one?
maybe it was.
I was saying, was that the 11 p.m. text one?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But anyway, so I was in an AMA meeting, and Michelle, she walks up to me, she puts her stuff down, she looks at me, she goes, "Hey, do you want an internship?" I said, "What?" She said, "Do you want an internship?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally." And she was like, "Well, I met this wonderful author, blah blah blah, she's awesome. She's looking for an intern. You need to do it." I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool. Sure." Like, And so that's when I got my resume and everything. And we had our first interview and everything. But it was so cool because Michelle introduced me to you. You then here recently introduced me to a very great guy, David. Um, Introduced me to him. Then he, after having a meeting with him, introduced me to two other people who then also have contacts with other people they were talking about hooking me up with. And it's like this one person introduced me to like 7 others. And it's just really cool because it's like that's what the power of networking is. And that's what the power of community and connections is, especially in marketing, because
Yes.
I mean, anybody who looks at the job market now knows that it is very competitive, and it's, AI is reading resumes, and you're, for every 100 applications you send out, you might get 10 that are read and 1 that you get an interview for. So I just think like those connections are just so important. And especially when you're kind of working towards internships and working towards ideally mentorships, it's the more people you meet, the better. And I know all of my introverts that are listening are cringing. And I know, because trust me, I was there. And, sometimes I'll set up a meeting and I'll be a little anxious before, and I'll be like, oh my goodness. But once you actually start talking, you're like, oh my gosh, it was so worth it, because, you have these connections that are just going to be, make or break probably your career, honestly. At least your starting out career. But I don't know. I just think that I guess my biggest piece of advice would be, well, A, join an organization, but B, focus on knowing people and learning people. Trying to figure out who you can connect with, and, how that connection can set you up for the field you want to go into. Like right now, I'm set up a meeting for someone here at Spark, for someone who works at marketing agencies, and it's a great kind of biased opinion, which I want about marketing agencies, because I want to know what a marketing agency is like. I've never worked for one. And then I've also met with people like, I mean, obviously you are in the public relations industry. I didn't even really know what public relations was. Really, I mean, a year ago, probably. And so I don't know. I just think it's really important. And so I guess it's just a lesson in meeting the right people, and then also doing your best. Like the reason my professor reached out to me was because I was an A+ student. I worked really hard. I was really into the classes. I asked questions. I, participated in coursework. Like, school isn't just about a GPA. Like that's important, but it's also about your work ethic and your participation. And if you want to show up to class and sit in the back and look at TikToks during class, I mean, you can. I guess that's your prerogative. But ultimately, you get what you put in. And so when you put in that effort, you're going to reap a lot better results. I don't necessarily consider myself a genius, but I work really hard. And I think that people notice that more than having necessarily a 4.0, if that makes sense.
That is a fantastic tip to not only show up to class, but show up ready to learn. And that will catch the attention of your professor. And then you never know who your professor knows.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important, too, as we talk about the importance of building connections, is that you always want to see how you can help the other person.
Yes.
I think that's so important. I mean, even though it might seem like, oh, well, I'm the veteran, I'm the one helping you, but you've helped me as well. It's been a mutual relationship, particularly with your organizational skills from your business background. Seriously, you're very good at that. And then I think you've forced me, I don't know if that's the right word. I was already using AI a little, but we're using it way more now since we become so cognizant of how AI can help us with certain things in the marketing PR world. So you've been great for helping me as well. And I think that's really important to emphasize. It's not always what's in it for me. It's how can I help you? And you'd be amazed how that blossoms into things can come back to you as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point that you made, is that just because you're the intern or the mentee, that doesn't mean that you don't have things to offer, or else why would they be paying you to be there? They're not paying you to get them coffee. I mean, they can get a barista to do that. I think that they're paying you because you have that insight, you have that current trends knowledge, that even so much as a vocabulary slang word that someone might not understand, like, you have something to offer. And I think that it's important that you don't lose sight that you do have that thing to offer, even if it feels like you're in a mostly take relationship. Find out what you offer and do it really well and keep getting better at it. I think that's important.
Fantastic. That's great advice. One thing we need to tell folks, you are awesome at creating my quarterly newsletter, and they can find us on my website at marketingmel.com. That's marketingmel.com. And they can sign up for the newsletter there. They can find, we'll get recordings of this podcast up there. So that's probably the best way to reach out and connect with us is through my website at MarketingMel. And just that final shout out for you and how great you're doing on the newsletter, among other, as we say, duties as assigned, right?
Duties as assigned.
Well, are there any other go backs, as we used to say, for the good of the firm? We used to say years ago, but for the good of the podcast that you wanted to cover that maybe we didn't cover on this episode 1?
I mean, honestly, we've got the shout out, we've got the plug. I think we're doing great. Oh, also, I'm going to be working on a contact form. So if you are interested in being a sponsor for this podcast, we accept, all kinds of, individuals who are interested in marketing or PR or frankly, business in general or kind of whatever. If you want to sponsor this podcast, we'll have a connect form up on that website for marketingmel.com.
And definitely guests as well.
Oh, and guests as well.
Future guests would be great.
Yes. So this is exciting. So we always like people. We like talking to people. So
Absolutely.
Right. So so hit us up.
Thank you so much for listening to Marketing Mel Tells. And don't forget to build community one connection at a time.
Absolutely.
See you later, Kaitlin.
Bye.
Bye.